Hiya there. Welcome to the last mini lecture of the urinary system. So this one, it should be relatively short. We're just going to do a quick summary of putting everything on one picture and then one slide on micturation, the reflex that triggers urination. All right, so you should have this diagram in your textbook. This is a really good summary. It's showing you the blood flow as well as the tubular fluid flow of a single nephron, of a juxtamedullary nephron, the ones with the long loops of Henle and the vasa recta. So you might want to use this as kind of a guide as you're progressing through your studying, making sure that you can describe all of the events that are happening at each part of your nephron. So for example, for the filtration process, you should be able to go through and describe what's the structure of your glomerulus, the afferent arteriole, the efferent arteriole, the regulation of the glomerular filtration rate, the pressures are involved with maintaining filtration, what can happen with autoregulation and hormonal regulation and autonomic regulation of the GFR. So all of those things that take place and happen within the glomerulus. Then we talked about the PCT. So everything that takes place here, what's reabsorbed, what's secreted, what's going on with the structure, the microvilli, the cells, increasing that surface area for reabsorption. Then we took a look at the loop of Henle, the nephron loop with countercurrent multiplication, the different characteristics of the permeabilities on the descending limb versus the ascending limb. How does that allow us to reabsorb water and salts right next to each other, even though they're being driven by different mechanisms? Then we took a look at the collecting duct and the DCT, distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. What were the things that were reabsorbed here? Aldosterone regulation, ADH regulation of water reabsorption, aldosterone regulation of water reabsorption. What's going on with these concentrations in the medulla all the way down here? How does urea play a role in this? So I like this diagram, even though I just drew all over it, because what it does is it kind of gives you that big picture so you're not stuck on each individual piece, even though you do need to know those details, but then this will allow you to almost like a map. You can say, okay, so how well do I know this part? How well do I know this part and this part and this part? So use this as kind of that guide, as this like a journey of what's happening with the blood that goes in, being all the peritubular capillaries and vasa recta are picking up all of those things that we just reabsorbed. What's happening with the tubular fluid as it's going through each part of your nephron. So again, send questions, come to a Zoom office hour. If any of the part of this renal physiology is challenging to you, or you just need clarification or a sounding board to listen as you kind of tell me what you know, I'm totally happy doing that. All right, so moving on to the last piece, I'm not going to go over the anatomy of the urinary bladder and stuff like that. You can work through that on your own. So this is taking a look at your micturation reflex. And if you go through it, it's actually pretty similar to the defecation reflex that we saw at the end of the digestive system. Similar mechanisms are in play. We have some conscious control and unconscious control of when we choose to urinate. And we have stretch receptors, we have short reflexes and long reflexes. So let's just go ahead and kind of go through the parts. So we're going to start at the start. That's great. They provide us a start arrow. So let's say, it's been a couple hours or so, you've drinking some water, your kidneys are filtering, everything's going through the minor calyx, the major calyx, the renal pelvis, the ureters. Now we're filling up our urinary bladder. There are stretch receptors embedded in the wall of the urinary bladder. And what that does is it sends a couple signals. So this short little reflex is kind of L1, so our distortion of our stretch receptors, that's activating that our urinary bladder is full. It's going to send some signal to your pelvic nerves, as well as kind of this loop here, parasympathetic preganglionic fibers to our postganglionic fibers, right? That's our autonomic nervous system control, which are going to send the signal to contract your detrusor muscle. So we're going to start getting some urinary bladder contractions, which is going to further distort your urinary bladder, activating those sensory neurons again. So this is our little local positive feedback loop. So we stimulate the neurons in the sacral spinal cord, which are going to go and stimulate some contractions, and so the bladder starts to contract. So that's kind of the local level. So this kind of see one pathway up here. So the local pathway is kind of this purpley color. The blue is our central pathway. So here's an interneuron is going to send some sensations up, ascending pathways up to our thalamus. The thalamus is going to relay that to our cerebral cortex saying, hey, you're going to have to go pee pretty soon. So then that's going to send this signal here down all the way to that your urethral sphincters. So your conscious control, you have conscious control of your external anal sphincter, wrong system, external urethral sphincter. So you feel that sensation that urination is going to have to happen. You close that external urethral sphincter consciously, while as the pressure is building up, the internal urethral sphincter is going to relax based on the pressure that's building up. They're showing the male anatomy here, but it would be the same with the female anatomy. And so then at the right moment that you choose, go to the bathroom. If you're in the woods, you go behind a tree or, whatever. So then you have the conscious control to open up that external urethral sphincter, which allows for the urination to happen. Your detrusor muscle, the bladder muscle, will just continue to contract. And then once your bladder is empty, this message gets shut down because there's no longer stretching those stretch receptors. The whole signaling stops until a couple hours later. You're going to fill up your bladder again, and the process continues. So we have this local control, we have the central control with our awareness that urination needs to take place, which allows us to control our external urethral sphincter. Now in babies, those ascending and descending ascending and descending tracts are not developed yet. And so they lack that ability to control that external urethral sphincter. So that's why they have to wear diapers to catch all of that waste. And it's the same with the defecation reflex. But then as they age and you do toilet training and that kind of stuff, it is at that age that those ascending and descending tracts have been fully myelinated or developed properly. So then they can sense that they have to urinate. They know that they have the ability to hold those sphincters closed until they get to the proper location. So that's what's happening in infants. As you age, when you get older, sometimes those sensations go away and you lose the ability to keep those muscles closed. You could have lost tone over the years because it's skeletal muscles. These sphincters, external sphincters, are skeletal, which means conscious control. So then somebody might be incontinent and not be able to hold their bladder or hold their bowels as they age. Another thing to think about is what if somebody has a spinal cord injury? And I didn't talk about this in the digestive system, but it will work the same way. If you have a severing of the spinal cord, so let's say, something happens, excuse me, that severs the spinal cord, you lose that conscious control. You lose the sensation that your bladder or bowel is getting filled. You lose the ability to control your external sphincters, but your local circuit is still happening. And the external urethral and external anal sphincters will open up and relax at a certain pressure threshold. So people who are paralyzed or have spinal cord injuries, they can still urinate and defecate. They just have lost the control of that ability to urinate and defecate. So they usually have to wear like adult diapers or something like that and have caregivers help with that cleaning and stuff. So that wraps it up. We did it. We finished the urinary system, which is just one of the 2 chapters this week. I know we're cramming 2 chapters into 2 weeks, which is more than what we've done in the past, but these 2 chapters really just go so well together. So when we get into chapter 27 next, you'll see a lot of connection to what we've already done. So it really is more of like an application chapter, not so much a whole bunch of new information, but we're taking what we've learned in the hormones, what we've learned in the respiratory system and the digestive system and then this urinary system, and we're really applying it all to kind of real life scenarios of how does our body maintain homeostasis of electrolytes, fluid balance, and acid-base balance. All right, I will see you next time. Bye.